Hey everybody, I'm Katallina, and today we're here to talk about episode 3 of Demon Slayer season 4. Something I've noticed, and that I think I'm going to enjoy if my theory ends up being correct, is that we seem to be making this gradual progression through the various Hashira characters and actually either exploring our memories with them, or getting some more time with them, or meeting them and getting to know them better. We seem to be going in a pseudo-order as well. We kind of got a hint of the emotional connection that Tanjiro had with Rengoku when he reflected back on Rengoku's death, and that was tied in beautifully with the idea that Gyu is so upset about the loss of Sabito and everything, and we're going to obviously, I would hope at least, see Gyu actually end up doing some training with us down the road, but it was cool to see that set up that way. And from there we've moved into this week's episode where we're actually getting to have some time with Tengen and with his wives, and to see how they've been doing and to see what they're doing now in a post-Gyutaro world where Tengen was injured and Tengen has now retired. Fortunately, we can see that Tengen has not totally given up on the idea of Hashira or on dealing with demons and stuff like that. Those who cannot do, teach. And Tengen is taking that motto and doing the absolute best that he can with it. And I thought that it was really cool to see the way that they were representing his character, and the way that they actually dealt with talking about his disability and how it's been impacting him. It wasn't something that was beaten over the head for people or anything, but it was something that did seem to really matter, and that the way that they subtly had his wives talk about it and how they showed his determination versus their awareness of his limitations was interesting. And one of the things that I really liked about this is that by the end of the episode, just as the other students are realizing their own worth in relation to Tanjiro, Tengen is going through this struggle with his own worth now that he can't fight on the front lines. And I really like how both the new students and the old master, I mean Tengen's not old, but you know what I mean, he's retired because of injuries, are both coming to the same conclusion. Speaking about the central aspect of that, of course, we need to talk about Tanjiro and what happens with him in this episode. And for Tanjiro, we're again looking at the idea of perseverance, but we're also looking at the reality that from Tanjiro's point of view, he is I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this happen, I'm going to be the one who beats Muzan. And that's a big claim to make, because he's never actually faced off against Muzan in any kind of actual combat. But that certainty, that confidence, it kind of made me think of this old poem my grandpa used to say. Once a common coward stood outside a castle gate. Beside him stood a hero with whom he did debate. They're safe in such a fortress. There is no way to break it. On, exclaimed the hero. I'll find a way or make it. And Tanjiro's determination, of course, is driven by the reality that if he fails, Nezuko is going to get consumed, Muzan is going to conquer the sun, and the world, for all we know, is never going to be the same. I mean, there is a 50-50 chance that Muzan decides to hightail it to Hawaii and sit and drink cocktails, or that he takes over the world. We have no idea. The Demon Slayers have no clue what he would actually do with that or what would go on, and regardless of what the consequences would be, they want no part of it, and who can blame them? That's just how it is. But the interesting thing, in contrast to Tanjiro's determination that is rock solid from word go, we see a lot of other more common grunt type demon slayers who are just your average person, background characters, struggling and being afraid and everything. And I think that that's actually a really important thing to highlight, because we're getting closer and closer to the end of this situation, and for a lot of these people it probably seems like a very dire situation. And for a lot of these people, whether they are common rank and file or whether they're the Hashira or even our main characters, there are going to be consequences. Nobody's guaranteed to get out of this safely. So to have no one have any fear or any doubt or anything would make for a much weaker story. But we don't just merely see their fear and doubt here. We get that highlighted, but what we ultimately get by the end of the episode is the beauty of this idea that even if they are afraid, even if they are not going to be the best, in order to become something great, one must first be. And that is an incredibly important message, and I'm really glad that they decided to tackle that here. Lastly, of course, we have the reality that even the more important and more established Hashira who've been doing this for a long time aren't necessarily immune to having fears and doubts and concerns and stuff like that. We see this in the conversation between the Wind Hashira and the Serpent Hashira, where they're looking back on the fight that we saw in episode 1, and they're concerned about the fact that they're not really seeing the demons much. They're concerned about where the castle is and the fact that they couldn't find it or relocate it or anything. They're concerned about the quiet and the fact that the quiet could be a calm before the storm. And yet at the same time, by the end of their conversation, they both actually came to ask each other to have a spar, because while they can't find the castle, they realize that even though they are concerned or possibly even afraid, that sitting around and being afraid isn't going to help them, and that the best thing they can actually do is find some way to take motion. We see that as well with Gyu and Tanjiro's noodle eating contest. Tanjiro is too injured to actually do anything really physical, so he and Gyu have this contest because Tanjiro is trying to convince Gyu to teach people. And of course, Tanjiro ultimately, as far as I know, ends up winning that contest, and I just thought that was a really cool way to highlight this, because the two things I really took away from this episode, and as somebody who has disabilities, I thought these were really amazing, were the idea that even if you can't do something perfectly, if you expect perfection and will only do things when you can demand perfection, you'll never do anything. And also, it's better to do something and to not do it perfectly than to not do something because you're afraid you won't do it perfectly. I just thought the overall feel of the episode was really good. It's going to be interesting going forward because it looks like we are going to go and spend time with the Mist Hashira next. I know, I'm so terrible with names. But it'll be interesting to see what exactly will go down there. And it'll be interesting to see whether my theory is right and whether we're just going to be working our way through the different Hashira and seeing what's going on with them and the people around them and the connections Tanjiro has made, or deepening connections we don't have yet. It's really important that these stories actually happen because these are going to add weight and consequences to everything that happens going forward, and with certain characters whom we haven't had a lot of time to interact with. Without this, they're just going to get to be used as cannon fodder, and that just wouldn't make for as strong a type of storytelling. Anyway, I really liked this episode. I thought it was interesting. I do think it was a bit spread out in the different things that it showed, but I think that, for example, they were talking about their spar, and then we see the spar with Tengen and with Tanjiro, and I thought that was a really cool way to shift that over, especially given the reality that we've seen the Wind and Snake Hashira fight in episode 1, so that wasn't necessarily necessary, but it tied into what was going on with the main group really well. Anyway, I'd love to know what you guys thought of this episode, so feel free to drop a comment below, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!